Imagine a civilization at the very zenith of its power. Ancient Egypt, a land where golden obelisks pierced the sky, where the Nile flowed like a vein of life through the desert, and where the Pharaoh was not merely a king, but a living god walking among men. His word was law, his armies were invincible, and his ego knew no bounds. Now, contrast this image of absolute hegemony with a single, fragile basket drifting aimlessly on the water. Inside lies a helpless infant, abandoned to the mercy of crocodiles and currents. History tells us that this was not just a child. This was the seed of a revolution. This is the story of the ultimate underdog. How did a baby, sentenced to death before he could even crawl, grow up to shatter the chains of the world's greatest superpower? This is episode 5 of Secrets of the Bible, and today we unravel the epic saga of Moses, Hazrat Musa A.S, a narrative where water turns to blood, sticks turn to serpents, and the impossible becomes reality. Before we step into the sands of time, if you believe that truth is stranger than fiction, hit that like button. If you are new here, subscribe and join our journey into the past. Let us open the pages of history. To understand the magnitude of this story, we must first understand the darkness that birthed it. The Israelites, descendants of Joseph, Yusuf A.S., had been living in Egypt for centuries. But the favor they once held had turned to ash. A new pharaoh ascended to the throne, a tyrant consumed by paranoia. His astrologers and soothsayers whispered a terrifying prophecy into his ear. A child is born among the Hebrew slaves, who will not only destroy your kingdom but will strip you of your crown and claim divinity for a higher power. Consumed by the fear of losing control, Pharaoh issued a decree that remains one of history's most brutal acts of genocide. He ordered that every male child born to the Israelites be slaughtered immediately. The streets of Goshen were filled with the wailing of mothers. The Nile, usually a source of life, became a graveyard. It was a time of absolute despair, where hope seemed like a dangerous delusion. Yet it is often in the deepest darkness that the brightest light is kindled. In the midst of this slaughter, a woman named Jochebed gave birth to a beautiful boy. For months, she hid him, silencing his cries, living in constant terror of the royal guards. But as the child grew, silence became impossible. Guided by divine inspiration, she made a choice that defies maternal instinct. She wove a basket of reeds, coated it with pitch and tar to make it watertight, and placed her son, into the unpredictable currents of the Nile. This was the first act of divine providence. The river did not drown him. Instead, it carried him gently downstream past the reeds and the predators, directly into the private bathing pools of the royal palace. Fate, it seems, has a sense of irony. The basket was discovered not by a soldier, but by the women of the pharaoh's household, specifically the pharaoh's wife or daughter, depending on the text. When the basket was opened, the cry of the infant melted her heart. Despite knowing this was a Hebrew child, a child her husband had sentenced to death, she decided to adopt him. And in a twist that no fiction writer could invent, the baby's biological mother was hired as his wet nurse. The very child Pharaoh sought to kill was now being raised in his own lap, eating from his table, and being trained in the arts of war and leadership at the expense of the state. Years turned into decades. The infant in the basket grew into a man of status and power. Moses walked the marble halls of Memphis and Thebes as a prince of Egypt. He wore the finest linen, rode the fastest chariots, and learned the wisdom of the ancients. Yet beneath the gold and the makeup, a storm was brewing. Moses knew he was different. He saw the grand monuments of Egypt and realized they were built on the broken backs of his own people. He felt a spiritual disconnect from the idols of Egypt and a deep biological pull toward the suffering slaves in the mud pits. The duality of his existence was tearing him apart. Was he a master, or was he a brother to the enslaved? This internal conflict was destined to explode. The turning point came suddenly. One afternoon, while inspecting the work sites, Moses witnessed a brutal scene, an Egyptian taskmaster beating a helpless Hebrew slave to the brink of death. A righteous anger, buried for years, erupted. Moses struck the Egyptian. It was a single blow, perhaps intended only to stop the assault, but the Egyptian fell dead. In that split second, Moses went from royalty to a fugitive. He buried the body in the sand, hoping the secret would stay hidden. But secrets in a palace rarely do. The next day, he realized his deed was known. Pharaoh, seeing treason in his own house, signed his death warrant. The prince had no choice. He stripped off his royal insignia and fled into the unforgiving void of the Sinai desert. He left behind wealth, power, and family to become a nobody. For the next 10 years, the man who was destined to lead nations lived the life of a simple shepherd in the land of Midian. He married, had children, and spent his days guiding sheep through rocky valleys. This period is often overlooked, but it was crucial. The arrogance of the palace had to be scrubbed away. The impulsive anger had to be tempered with patience. God was preparing him. You see, you cannot lead a stubborn nation until you have learned the patience required to lead stubborn sheep. The silence of the desert was not empty. It was a classroom. Moses thought his life was over, that he would die an old shepherd, forgotten by history. But destiny was merely waiting for the right moment. That moment arrived on a cold, dark night near Mount Horeb, Sinai. Moses saw a fire in the distance, a bush that was engulfed in flames yet was not being consumed by them. Driven by curiosity, he climbed the mountain. As he approached the supernatural sight, a voice thundered from the fire, a voice that transcended time and space. "Moses, I am the God of your fathers. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." The shepherd trembled. The mission given to him was terrifying. Go back to the superpower you fled from. Walk into the court of the man who wants to kill you. And demand the impossible. Let my people go. Moses was not a warrior. He had a speech impediment. He was a fugitive, and he was afraid. He pleaded, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" But God gave him a promise that would change the world. "I will be with you." Armed only with a wooden staff and his brother Aaron, the shepherd turned back toward Egypt. The stage was set for the greatest confrontation in antiquity. The return of Moses to Egypt was not a quiet homecoming. It was the prelude to a storm. Picture the scene: the royal court of Memphis, a place dripping with gold, incense, and the intimidating silence of absolute power. Into this arena walked two old men dressed in the rough wool of shepherds, Moses and Aaron. To the elites of Egypt, they looked like beggars. But when Moses spoke, the air in the room shifted. He did not ask. He commanded, "Let my people go." Pharaoh, seated high on his throne, looked down with amusement and contempt. To him the God of these slaves was a myth, a joke. He sneered, "Who is this Lord that I should obey him? I do not know him, and I will not let Israel go." This was not just a rejection, it was a challenge. Pharaoh was asserting that he was the supreme authority in the universe. In his arrogance, he increased the burden on the slaves, forcing them to make bricks without straw. The situation for the Israelites went from bad to unbearable. They cursed Moses. It seemed the mission had failed before it even began. But in the grand design of the divine, things often get worse before they get better. The stage was being set for a demonstration of power that would echo through eternity. Pharaoh demanded a sign. He wanted to see the power of this invisible God. Moses threw down his simple wooden staff. In a flash, the wood writhed, grew scales, and transformed into a massive hissing serpent. The court gasped. But Pharaoh was unimpressed. Egypt was the land of dark arts and sorcery. He summoned his high priests and magicians, masters of illusion who had served the dark gods for decades. They threw down their ropes and staffs, and through their spells and trickery, their objects also appeared to become snakes. The floor was alive with vipers. Pharaoh smiled. He thought it was a draw, but then the impossible happened. The serpent of Moses didn't just hiss, it attacked. It devoured the magician's snakes one by one, swallowing the falsehoods whole. When Moses picked it up, it returned to being a staff. The message was clear: your magic is a trick. My power is the truth. The magicians, realizing they were outmatched by a force beyond nature, fell to their knees in prostration. They cried out, "We believe in the Lord of Moses and Aaron." These men, the staunchest defenders of Pharaoh's religion, were the first to convert. Yet Pharaoh's heart remained as hard as the stone of his pyramids. He saw the truth, but his ego refused to bow. Because Pharaoh refused to listen to reason, he had to listen to ruin. The 10 plagues were not just random disasters. They were a systematic dismantling of the Egyptian pantheon. God turned the Nile, the bloodstream of Egypt, worshipped as a god, into literal blood. The stench was unbearable. Fish died, and the people dug desperately for water, but found only horror. Yet Pharaoh refused. So the frogs came, not just a few, but a carpet of slime covering every inch of the land, hopping into ovens, beds, and cradles. Then came the lice and the swarms of flies, bringing disease and misery. The livestock died, the economy crumbled, and boils broke out on the skin of man and beast. Still, the tyrant sat on his throne, stubborn and defiant. Then the sky turned black. A storm of hail and fire rained down, shattering the trees and crops. Locusts arrived like a living cloud, devouring whatever green was left. Then a darkness so thick it could be felt covered Egypt for 3 days, a supernatural void where no torch could stay lit. Egypt was on its knees. Its gods were silent. Its people were broken, but the final blow was yet to come. In one terrifying night, death swept through every Egyptian home, from the palace to the dungeon. The wail of grief was so loud it could be heard across the desert. Finally, broken by the loss of his own heir, Pharaoh screamed the words Moses had waited to hear. "Go! Leave! Take everything and go!" Under the cover of night, a nation was born. Millions of Israelites, their livestock and their families began the great exodus. They marched away from the chains that had bound them for 400 years. But the heart of a tyrant is a fickle thing. As the sun rose and the shock of grief faded, Pharaoh looked at his empty work sites and his ruined economy. Regret turned into rage. "What have we done?" he roared. "We have let our slaves go!" He rallied his elite forces, 600 chosen chariots, the tanks of the ancient world, and the entire Egyptian army. They thundered into the desert, a machine of death hungry for revenge. The Israelites were camped by the Red Sea. It was a dead end. To their front, the deep, churning waters. To their left and right, rugged mountains. And behind them, the rising dust cloud of Pharaoh's approaching army. Panic ensued. The people screamed at Moses, "Were there no graves in Egypt that you brought us here to die?" It was the moment of ultimate despair. Logically, it was over. But Moses stood like a rock amidst the chaos. He spoke with the calm of a man who sees what others cannot. "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today." Then came the command that defied physics. God told Moses, "Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea." A strong east wind began to blow. It roared all night, a divine turbine pushing the waters apart. Slowly, miraculously, the sea split. The water didn't just recede. It stood up like 2 towering walls of liquid glass, creating a dry highway through the ocean floor. The Israelites walked through in awe, the moonlight reflecting off the walls of water where fish swam beside them. They crossed to safety. Pharaoh arrived at the shore. Blinded by bloodlust and arrogance, he did not stop to think why the sea had opened. He saw only a path to his enemies. He ordered his army to charge into the seabed. It was a trap set by the Creator. When the last Israelite stepped onto the far shore and the entire Egyptian army was in the belly of the sea, the command was given. The wheels of the chariots began to break. Confusion spread. The soldiers realized too late. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. Let us flee. But flight was impossible. Moses stretched his hand out one last time. The walls of water collapsed. The sea returned to its place with the force of 1,000 crashing waves. In those final swirling moments, as the cold water crushed the breath from his lungs, the man who claimed to be a god realized his mortality. The Quran tells us that in his final gasping breath, Pharaoh cried out, "I believe that there is no God, but he in whom the children of Israel believe, and I am of the Muslims." But the time for faith had passed. The response from the divine was chilling. Now? And indeed, you disobeyed before, and were of the corruptors. His body was thrown out of the sea, preserved as a sign for all generations, a memento of the fact that no man is too high to fall. On the other side of the water, the Israelites sang songs of freedom. But their journey was not just about escaping a physical tyrant, it was about serving a higher purpose. Moses led them to Mount Sinai, where the sky thundered once more. There, he received the Torah and the 10 Commandments, the moral foundation of modern civilization. The story of Moses is not just ancient history, it is a timeless mirror. It asks us, who is the Pharaoh in your life? What is the Red Sea blocking your path? It teaches us that when you align yourself with the truth, even if you are weak, you are a majority. It teaches us that arrogance is the precursor to destruction, and that hope can carve a road through the ocean. This was the epic saga of the prince who became a prophet. But the secrets of the Bible run deep. In our next episode, we will uncover the mystery of the Ark of the Covenant, the gold-plated chest that carried the power of God and vanished from history. Where is it now? Join us next time to find out. If this story moved you, please recommend this video to a friend. Share it on your social media and leave a comment below. What was the most powerful moment for you, the burning bush or the splitting sea? Until next time, keep seeking the truth.